protest or anything noble, just idiots. There's a lot of it about. Now that's John.
Well, now, we're used to a world in which the politicians are in control of events, setting the parameters within which we can all just get on with our lives. But since last week's referendum, when the people took control, the politicians have been floundering to catch up. But did it all happen because the men in charge, and they were all men, began playing power games worthy of TV fiction? Porrick O'Brien has this.
Julius Caesar, Game of Thrones, Macbeth, House of Cards.
That's right. We don't submit to terror.
Where a privileged elite graduate together, carve up countries.
We make the terror.
Tell me your favourite scene, Mr. Gove, from Game of Thrones.
My favourite character in Game of Thrones is undoubtedly Tyrion Lannister. And the moment I love most is when he leads what's apparently a hopeless charge of his troops.
Those are brave men knocking at our door. Let's go kill them!
This misshapen dwarf, reviled throughout his life, thought in the eyes of some to be a toxic figure, can at last rally a small band of loyal followers.
The question: has a posh boy parlour game turned dark? Has the British populace replaced a pig's head?
This is not a time to quail. It is not a crisis, a time not to fight against the tide of history, but to take that tide at the flood and sail on to fortune.
The Julius Caesar quote, part rallying cry, part evil-eyeing the assassin.
On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or lose our ventures.
What's most shocking about this is not the tragedy, it's frivolity that such little people, such shallow people, such unscrupulous people can do this to our country and get away with it. I fear, I can't prove this, I hope I'm wrong, I think we're like King Lear's England, divided, fighting each other with no obvious future, and surrounded by Gonerils and Reagans, who all flatter the electorate. And what worries me is what happens when the peasants find out they've been lied to.
The thing about Shakespeare, you can channel any world view through the prose. The characters in today's drama, though, real world, not caricature.
Noble Cassius.
We have this sort of populist revolt against the establishment led by, well, basically the Oxford Union, and now they're all turning on each other, sort of lopping each other's heads off.
It looks mad, doesn't it? But I think what's interesting is there are different kinds of Conservatives who you're seeing fighting here. So Michael Gove has actually a very different social background to David Cameron. He was the adopted son of a fishmonger, grew up in Aberdeen, scholarship boy who got to Oxford completely to the surprise of his parents. David Cameron, obviously, to the manor born, more like Boris Johnson. But I think Gove, as a result, has always had this slightly revolutionary zeal. So he's not a sort of conserving Conservative, he's a radical.
And last night, another scene in the psychodrama, with the country startled in the headlights, the Conservative summer ball.
Porrick O'Brien reporting. We join us now are the writer and columnist for the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday, Peter Hitchens, the writer, Laurie Pennie, and from his home in Berkshire, the author and Labour Party supporter, Robert Harris. Perhaps we'll put Labour slightly to one side, but it seems to be part of it too. How have we fallen so far, Robert?
Well, it's hard to identify any one cause. I think the pace of technological change has overwhelmed our political structures and our social structures, and we're no longer really able to cope. I don't think the old parties, the old way of doing things can respond anymore. It's broken. And I think what we've seen over the last year, and in particular over the last week, is the product of this breakdown in the old way of doing things. And something is slouching to Bethlehem to be born out of all this, and it might be quite worrying.
Well, do you subscribe to the view that the digital revolution has played a very big part in all this?
No, not really. It obviously speeds things up. But what's fundamentally wrong is that the two main parties don't reflect the divisions in this country anymore. They reflect ancient, dead divisions, and the real ones between social conservatives and social liberals particularly, and against those who wish this to be an independent country and those who prefer it to be in the European Union, were much better reflected in the referendum. And the ghosts of two new parties emerged in that referendum. You can see them almost taking shape in front of us. If only we could get rid of the two old dead corpse parties, we might actually have some real politics in this country instead of dreadful Blairite consensus that we've suffered for the past, nearly 20 years.
Laurie Pennie, do you agree with that analysis?
Oh, no, I mean, honestly, what's happening at the moment in government seems to be just overgrown schoolboys playing out long-standing feuds and, unscrupulous people. They have no compunction, they lie, and they are prepared to take the entire country down with them in their struggle for power. The Game of Thrones analogy is actually quite apt, and I can't believe I'm talking with you about this, Jon Snow. But it's...
Well, I know nothing.
You know nothing, or should it be Jon Targaryen now? But anyway, Game of Thrones is a show about idiots with too much power ruining a country because they can't see the wider picture. And this is what's happening here. I think the only way the analogy breaks down is Michael Gove is certainly no Tyrion Lannister. He's not smart enough for that, I don't believe.
But Robert Harris, don't you think, in fact, it's the people that have overthrown the elite? I mean, it's the people who've not gone along with what the elite wanted, largely because quite a lot of them feel very alienated, and quite a lot of them have not had quite the share of the cherries that the rest of society has enjoyed.
I think that's true. I think that's been especially true since the financial crash, where those that seem to have caused it have become even richer and the victims have become even poorer. And I think it's that really which has focused the discontent. I would be wary of going down the line of saying that the referendum represented some healthy new form of democracy. I think that the moment politics becomes that binary, complicated issues are reduced to simple slogans on Twitter and on the side of buses. And I don't think it was a great advert for democracy. And really, I would say it's not so much that the people have taken control as the politicians have abdicated their responsibility. And by kicking that issue out into a referendum, it was really a betrayal of the very parliamentary democracy and government that I thought the Brexiteers were supposed to believe in.
Well, that is...
Don't get me wrong. I never approved of the referendum. I didn't want a referendum. What I've always wanted is particularly for the Conservative Party to collapse and be replaced by a genuine Conservative Party. One would have no objections to the Conservative Party if it campaigned as, say, the Socialist Workers' Party or something more equivalent to what it actually does. But it is, at the moment, it pretends to be a Conservative Party in a country which badly needs a Conservative Party and doesn't have one.
But is this
and the Labour Party also is not. I mean, the crucial, the binary part is this: the Labour Party doesn't love the poor, and the Tory Party doesn't love the country, and that is what they're supposed to do. We have in this country been free largely because of the strong difference between the two major parties. It was Richard Neville who said in the 60s it was an inch of difference between the two parties. It was in that inch we all live, and an adversarial parliament is very important for freedom. The problem with our parliament at the moment is it's anything but adversarial. It's all Blairites from north to south and east to west, carpeting.
Well, I noticed neither of you have mentioned the media. I mean, what role did Rupert Murdoch and Mr. Dacre play in all this?
Well, who knows? I mean,
the Gove email seems to suggest quite a lot.
The old lesson of the media, and this has been true since probably the 1930s, when the big press barons really first got engaged, is that they can fan and amplify a genuine shift in public opinion. They can't create one. There is a real discontent here.
Is that true?
Honestly, the real tragedy here is that what was phrased and sold in many ways as a working class victory and a victory of ordinary people, well, it's not been delivered. It's been a victory for a certain subset of elites. And what we have now is an amped up version of what we had before, which is spoiled men in government and in the press arguing over what this tiny slice of power should look like. Meanwhile, you have people like those kids we saw on the news just before, those frightened kids in that school whose real lives are going to be affected by this. The people arguing about this at the top of government are not the people whose lives are going to be materially affected. They are not the people living in fear right now. And I think it is a huge betrayal by the political class, by Labour, by the Conservatives. People asked for sovereignty. We don't even know who's in charge at the moment. Labour and the Tories are too busy eating themselves to lay out any sort of plan. It is disgraceful. I'm ashamed of this country this week.
Robert Harris, from whence comes redemption?
Well, it's not necessarily easy to see it. I mean, I've written books about the fall of the Roman Republic, and the problem that happened there was that they got away from their constitution by introducing endless special measures, giving special commands and so on, and the whole system broke up. And what worries me